Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because we are about to take a genuinely epic journey through time. We're going to look at three massive turning points in human history. And, these aren't just dates on a calendar. These are profound moments of disruption that fundamentally alter the trajectory of human civilization. We're talking about the raw forces that completely dismantled old worlds and built the one we live in today.
Now really think about that for a second. What does it actually take to change the course of history completely? I mean, is it a single person, a brilliant new idea, or maybe some revolutionary piece of technology? Well, as we're going to see today, the answer is kind of all of the above. But the way these catalysts ignite change is incredibly distinct.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Moments that reshaped history. 2. Hastings, tactics and turnover. 3. The English Reformation. 4. Steam power and progress. And finally, 5. Legacies of lasting change.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Moments that Reshaped History, the Architecture of Disruption.
Throughout our time together today, we're going to look at three distinct types of disruption. We've got military, ideological, and technological. Think about it. Warfare redraws borders, right? It literally replaces rulers. Religion and ideology, well, they restructure the very foundation of societal belief and statehood. And industry? Industry reshapes our relationship with the physical world and even distance itself. These three forces are, without a doubt, the primary architects of the modern world you and I live in today.
Moving on to Section 2, let's zoom in on our first major catalyst, Hastings, tactics and turnover.
All right, so we're landing in the year 1066. This is the moment where military strategy completely decided the fate of England. Now, both armies had roughly 7,000 men, but honestly, the similarities stop right there. The contrast in preparation is just wild. Picture this. King Harold's Anglo-Saxons had just marched north for 4 days, fought a brutal battle, and then practically jogged all the way back south to meet this new threat. They were running on absolute fumes, and they fought entirely on foot. On the flip side, you have Duke William's Normans. They arrived weeks earlier. They were rested, highly organized with trained cavalry, archers, and get this, even a papal banner, which gave them immense psychological confidence.
What we're looking at here is a profound clash of military doctrines. On one hand, you've got the famous Anglo-Saxon shield wall. Housecarls would overlap these large circular shields to create a near impenetrable defensive line. It was basically daring the enemy to try and break through. On the other hand, you have the Norman approach. They relied on archers and ranged attacks designed to wear the enemy down from a distance. So, Harold is relying on a static, incredibly tough defensive formation, while William brings versatility and, crucially, mobility.
The battle kicked off bright and early at 9 a.m., and it was an absolute nail-biter. First, the Norman archers fire a massive volley, followed by an infantry charge, but Harold's shield wall, it held firm right on top of Senlac Hill. The Normans just couldn't break it. So William uses this brilliant tactical deception, the feigned retreat. A whole section of the Norman army actually pretended to run away and panic down the hill. And the Saxon army, thinking they'd won, broke their disciplined shield wall to chase them. Huge mistake. They got stuck in the marshy land at the bottom. The Normans turned right back around and slaughtered them. As the day wore on, William moved his archers to fire over the shields, and with their formation totally disintegrating, Harold was killed, the Saxon army just collapsed.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive macro consequence of that single tactical choice. On December 25th, 1066, William was crowned King of England, just like that. A change in military tactics effectively turned over the entire leadership of a nation. But, it wasn't exactly an instant victory lap. William now faced the absolutely monumental task of ruling a country full of angry, rebellious Anglo-Saxons who were still fiercely loyal to the king he'd just killed. Borders were redrawn, and the ruling class was permanently changed, all by the sword.
Which brings us to Section 3, the English Reformation, Ideology and Statehood.
So, transitioning from the literal battlefield of the 11th century to the ideological battlegrounds of the 16th century, we really need to understand what the English Reformation actually was. King Henry VIII initiated a massive rupture by separating the English Church from the Catholic Church. He basically declared himself, not the Pope in Rome, but himself as the supreme head of the Church of England. With just a single monarch's audacious edict, centuries of deeply ingrained religious allegiance and state infrastructure were entirely rewritten.
But here's the thing. Henry's break from Rome didn't just happen in a vacuum.
The groundwork had actually been laid for decades by interconnected movements. You had early figures like John Wycliffe and the Laity movement, which was an early push for church reform, really questioning doctrine. You had the rise of Christian humanism, prioritizing individual reason. Crucially, you had Martin Luther's 95 Theses sparking the broader Protestant Reformation. And acting as a massive accelerant for all these ideas was a profound piece of technology, Johannes Gutenberg's printing press. This allowed these radical new theological ideas to spread like wildfire, faster than ever before.
The result of all this? Decades of absolute ideological whiplash for the English people. It was a chaotic restructuring of society. It started with the Henrician Reformation, followed by his son's Edwardian Reformation, which pushed things even further. Then, boom, a sharp reversal right back to Catholicism under Mary in the Marian Restoration, before finally stabilizing under the Elizabethan settlement. This whole era proves that ideological destruction doesn't just change who goes to church on Sunday. It completely restructures the law, the power, and the very identity of an entire nation.
Let's move on to Section 4. Steam, Power, and Progress, the Machine Age.
Fast forwarding to the late 18th century, we transition from the power of the pen and the edict to the power of the machine. Up until this point, the speed of human progress was largely limited by, the speed of a horse, the current of a river, or the wind in a sail. But then, the world sped up. The sheer unprecedented velocity of the Industrial Revolution literally changed what it meant to be human. The catalyst here was a massive leap in engineering. Back in the late 17th century, inventors like Thomas Savery and Thomas Newcomen created these rudimentary steam devices, basically just for pumping water out of flooded mines. They were super basic and highly inefficient. But the real aha moment came in the late 18th century with James Watt. Watt introduced some brilliant innovations, specifically the separate condenser and a rotary motion mechanism. Suddenly, the steam engine wasn't just this clumsy water pump anymore, it was a hyper-efficient, continuous engine capable of powering complex machinery.
And the societal impact of this? It was immediate and absolutely staggering. Because steam power provided reliable, consistent energy on a massive scale, we saw the birth of the factory system and mass production. Textile mills and iron foundries just exploded into existence. This drove rapid economic growth, but honestly, more importantly, it physically moved humanity. We shifted from a localized agricultural society to an urbanized one. We basically invented the concept of the commute and the modern workday in the process, as millions of workers flocked from the countryside to centralized cities looking for factory employment.
But steam didn't just build the cities, right? It connected them, zooming out to a global scale. Steam engines revolutionized transportation. Steam locomotives drove rapid railway expansion across countries, facilitating trade at speeds people previously thought were impossible. Out on the water, steam-powered ships dramatically cut down transatlantic travel times. The steam engine effectively defeated distance. It permanently connected distant continents and laid the exact groundwork for the modern global economy, and yet the overnight shipping we all rely on today.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Legacies of Lasting Change.
So we've seen three completely different catalysts at work here. At Hastings, the sword and superior military tactics shaped borders and established entirely new ruling classes. During the Reformation, the stroke of a pen and a monarch's edict radically restructured national ideology and statehood. And then, during the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine transformed our economy, moving us from the fields to the factories and literally connecting the globe. The blueprints of our modern world were absolutely drafted by all three: the sword, the edict, and the engine.
Which leaves us with one final incredibly important thought to ponder today. We've seen exactly how dramatically the world can pivot based on a single battle, a single law, or a single invention. So if swords, edicts, and steam built the world we live in right now, what do you think will be the catalyst that defines our next era? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helps structure your understanding of these massive historical shifts. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.